Welcome to Target Eye. In today's video, we're diving into the Trump administration's foreign policy, specifically focusing on Africa and Europe. From shifting alliances to controversial policies, the Trump era marked a significant change in the U.S.'s approach to these regions. Stick around as we unpack the complexities of these relationships and how they've influenced global dynamics. First, let's look at the Trump administration's approach to Africa, which represented a shift from prior U.S. policies. While previous administrations prioritized development aid and anti-terror efforts, Trump's stance was largely centered on countering Chinese and Russian influence on the continent. Welcome to Target Eye Key Initiatives. Prosper Africa. This was the administration's signature initiative for Africa, designed to increase trade and investment between African nations and the U.S. The goal was to strengthen economic ties by supporting American businesses in the African market, with an emphasis on private investment over direct aid. Military presence and counterterrorism. Trump's policy in Africa continued the anti-terrorism agenda, focusing on combating groups like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. However, the administration also scaled back some military resources, particularly in West Africa, where U.S. troops were reduced to focus on perceived higher priority regions like the Middle East. Diplomatic relations. Trump's direct engagement with African leaders was limited, and his remarks about African nations often sparked controversy. Comments perceived as derogatory about African countries caused diplomatic friction, affecting the tone of U.S.-Africa relations during his term. However, some African leaders expressed support for Trump's focus on trade over aid, seeing it as an opportunity for more balanced economic partnerships. Overall impact. While some criticized the administration for neglecting Africa compared to prior administrations, others saw the trade-focused Prosper Africa initiative as a chance for African nations to develop sustainable economic growth. Yet, the policy's effectiveness in terms of tangible investment results remains a subject of debate. Next, let's explore Trump's approach to Europe, which brought a significant shift in U.S.-European relations, especially within NATO and the European Union. Key policies. NATO and defense spending. Trump often voiced frustration with European NATO members, calling on them to increase their defense spending to meet the 2% GDP goal agreed upon by NATO members. He argued that the U.S. was bearing too much of the financial burden for European defense, which led to tensions with allies like Germany and France. Tariffs and trade tensions. Another defining feature of the Trump administration's relationship with Europe was the imposition of tariffs on European goods, including steel and aluminum. These tariffs were part of Trump's America First trade policy, aimed at reducing the U.S. trade deficit. In response, the European Union imposed counter-tariffs on American goods, escalating tensions and prompting concerns about a potential trade war. Trump's approach to European allies was often transactional, focused on reducing what he saw as financial imbalances. His administration was vocal about its disapproval of the EU's trade policies, and Trump's meetings with European leaders were sometimes marked by visible disagreements. However, he maintained strong relations with leaders who shared similar views on immigration and nationalism, such as Hungary's Viktor Orbán. Overall impact. While Trump's stance on NATO spending did prompt some European countries to increase their defense budgets, his trade policies strained relationships within the EU. Many European leaders voiced a desire to establish greater independence from the U.S., advocating for a stronger EU foreign policy and defense framework in response to what they viewed as unpredictable U.S. leadership. Welcome to Target Eye. When comparing Trump's policies towards Africa and Europe, we see clear distinctions in focus and approach. Trade and economic strategy. The Trump administration promoted economic self-reliance for both Africa and Europe, but with different methods. In Africa, this took the form of encouraging private investment through Prosper Africa, while in Europe, it was more about renegotiating trade terms to reduce the U.S. trade deficit. This approach reflected Trump's America First ideology, emphasizing economic self-interest in foreign relations. Security and military involvement. In terms of security, Europe remained a primary focus, especially with Trump's emphasis on NATO spending. For Africa, military presence was maintained but scaled back in some regions, with the administration focusing on specific anti-terror operations rather than broad-based military engagement. The drawdown of U.S. troops in Africa raised concerns among some policymakers who worried it could leave a power vacuum for other global players like Russia and China. Diplomatic tone and engagement. Trump's tone toward both Africa and Europe sometimes strained relations. In Europe, he often took a confrontational stance, particularly with NATO allies, calling for financial accountability. His limited direct engagement with African leaders, coupled with controversial remarks, led to mixed reactions from African governments. In summary, the Trump administration's foreign policy towards Africa and Europe reflected a shift toward economic pragmatism and burden sharing. While Prosper Africa aimed to build stronger economic ties with African countries, Trump's approach to Europe focused on reshaping defense spending and trade terms. These policies generated mixed results and lasting impacts on U.S. relations in both regions, sparking debates about the future of these alliances. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Let us know in the comments which aspects of U.S. foreign policy you'd like us to cover next.